The Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund was launched in February 2021. Question is, so what has it achieved so far? Well, some answers may be found in its second integrated annual report for 2022-23. To discuss this, we have the fund's CEO, Sazini Mojapelo. Sazini, good afternoon to you and thank you so much for joining us. Suppose we look at the impactful work that the fund has achieved since inception. What have you done?
Thank you for having me and good afternoon to your viewers. We've had quite significant achievement. We have supported over 160 community-based organizations across the country who in turn have reached about 280,000 people in the first year of their implementation.
And over and above that, there are, of course, 5 key pillars that you focus on as a strategic framework as to how you deal with gender-based violence and femicide in the country. You yourself have been very well decorated as a CEO and board member of various NGOs with regards to dealing with issues of GBVF. Do you think that we're moving the needle, even with the appointment of the fund?
I think that we are making some strides. As you know, when the fund was set up, it has a specific mandate to facilitate the implementation of the National Strategic Plan Against Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And that strategic plan has got 6 pillars for the country, and we are responsible for that. Part of which is to drive prevention, which is pillar 2. Pillar 3 is around response, pillar 4 is around care, and economic power is pillar 5. Within those, we are trying to support organizations that are already working in the space. So our grant management program facilitates for those small organizations to implement their programs. And I think that's where we're starting to see some form of impact. I think also quite important to mention is the work that's happening in the justice system around the Tutuzela care centers. There's a lot of work that is happening there in providing support to survivors. But as the fund, one of the key things we want to focus on is prevention. So we have launched a campaign, a respect campaign. If some people have gone to the airport, particularly in Cape Town, you'd have seen a big board around that and all digital billboards and social media. What we're trying to do is to stop counting the number of people who have been affected by gender-based violence, but prevent it from the onset. And another initiative we're focusing on, which is linked to the NSP, is setting up what we call a private sector coalition, where we want workplaces to have a zero tolerance against any forms of violence, be it within the world of work or even when you're remote working. Most people are working from home, so we want to see how we can support those initiatives. And with over 10, 12 million people employed in South Africa, if we do drive a successful initiative, we'd actually see some change around the stats we're seeing in gender-based violence.
We'll unpack the Respect campaign as well, but many community-based organizations have lauded the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Fund as a catalyst, an amplifier of the groundwork that they have done, and many of them are under-resourced. So it does assist in terms of the support or auxiliary support that you provide for them. The Respect campaign on a one-to-one or behind closed doors, we know that contact crimes usually are perpetrated by people known to the victim or the survivor. There is still an element of shame or those cultural myths and practices that says you just need to stick it out. Maybe he will change, and you hope for the best until one ends up in a coffin. So how then do we get to that point where women are empowered? I mean, gender-based violence affects all, both genders. But in terms of women who may feel ashamed to want to come out and express their experiences at home or even in the workspace?
Well, what we're finding, as you rightfully say, is that the statistics are driven by intimate partner violence. And it says 1 in 3 women will experience some form of violence, and it normally comes from somebody they know or an intimate partner or someone they live with. What we are seeing is that some of the numbers, for example, are linked to children and young people. So there we need to report as a community. But what we're also trying to encourage people is to speak out. And I must say, for South Africa, the women's movement have played a very big role. And also the conviction rates have also contributed to the role where people are able to speak out without fear. But as you've rightfully stated, a big part of this is traditional and cultural norms that we don't want to say that they perpetuate the gender-based violence, but they do protect, and also they can also drive a patriarchal point of view that women are not able to speak out. And if they do and go and talk to an aunt would not support their leaving a marriage or leaving the home. But worse still, there are some cultural practices such as the one where you, I wouldn't want to single out a particular one. I'll give an example though, where I think there's been a lot of movement and petitions against it, which is similar to ukutwala, where a young girl, if is desired by a particular man, he can rape her and she's 13 and he goes to pay a cow or a goat and it's not reported as a crime. But that is statutory rape. And we do need to start speaking against that and going against some of these cultural norms, but also re-educating communities, faith-based institutions, traditional leaders around the harmful practices that today cannot be tolerated. And we're seeing a scourge and a rise in it. I think I heard that last year we read a stat, 90,000 teenage pregnancies. In fact, that means 90,000 young girls gave birth. And about 40% is below the age of 13. That for us as a nation, we can't accept. And we do need to do something about that. So giving you those stats shows you how we need to start embedding a new value system, a new way of doing, but it's not necessarily new. If you think of our Respect campaign, for example, it's founded on the belief of Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. So if you perform any crime or violence against me, we are becoming an increasingly violent nation. And it's important that we start curbing and reducing that. Hence our focus on prevention. How do we speak to men? Unfortunately, they are the perpetrators, the recorded high stats, and start saying, how do we stop gender-based violence? We've got other organizations that are starting to look at the boy child and saying, what about the boys? It's actually called that. How do we deal with the masculinity elements and try and raise them in a different way where they respect women, and gender equality is a big play within that.
All right, so the campaign is called Respect, based on the principles of Ubuntu, because we are all entitled. It's a basic human right where you're entitled to respect. So we're going to leave it there. And that is the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund CEO Sazini Mojapelo, unpacking the achievements and challenges of the fund since its inception.